On this episode of It's Mostly Bullshit, we're tackling the huge issue that is climate change. And because it is such a huge issue, I chose to catch up with a global expert on climate, and that was Blair Palese. Last week, we sat down and talked about the effects of climate change, specifically on Australia. Blair founded the 350.org project, which aims to rapidly end fossil fuels and the burden of fossil fuels in our climate. She writes for Climate and Capital Media, has worked for Greenpeace and The Body Shop, and is recognised globally as an expert on climate. So I asked her specifically what was mostly bullshit about the government's recent announcement of their gas-led recovery after COVID.
Well, in the esteemed words of our former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, who called the gas-led recovery plain and simply a fantasy and crazy. And I believe he actually went so far as to say it was batshit crazy. But, you know, this is a liberal former prime minister, not someone from the renewable energy sector or from the NGO sector. This is somebody who was looking at the economics as well as the impacts of what our government is recommending. So I've put together pretty much, you know, an overview of 4 key reasons why a gas-led recovery is mostly bullshit and why it absolutely makes no sense for Australia or the world. Firstly, emissions. So gas, as you may know, is quite an an emissions-intensive form of energy. If we're going to ensure that we want to live on a livable planet where our climate is livable for all of us, experts tell us and have told us years ago that we simply can't pursue any new coal, oil, or gas. So Australia's plans, in contrast to the rest of the world, who are really rolling back and heading for a net zero emissions approach to their economies, would mean us committing to greenhouse gas emissions well beyond what we know to be safe and to live within what we call the carbon budget, or the limit to how much carbon we can produce. It would in fact commit us and the world to really dangerous levels rather than diminishing levels of greenhouse gases that are all going up into our atmosphere. So natural gas primarily consists of methane, and it's, methane in general is one of the worst greenhouse global warming gases. It can't be overstated. It's estimated that over 20 years, methane traps 86 times as much heat in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So if you think carbon dioxide through coal, et cetera, has been bad, gas produces a whole new level of stupidity when it comes to climate change. Therefore, any comments or input from our government that calls it a transition fuel, a clean fuel, or a safe climate fuel is absolutely bullshit, according to every expert in the world. Australia's already identified gas resources. What we have already identified, if we burned them, would have a climate impact larger than the annual emissions from any country worldwide. And further resources pursued by our government and companies to continue to go after gas would mean increasing our annual emissions by extraordinary amounts. In many cases, way beyond our 1.5 goal of trying to stay at that much warming in our atmosphere. So such a gas expansion is utterly inconsistent with stopping climate change. And it's also inconsistent with all of the international commitments we've made with other countries around the world. Secondly, and maybe more importantly, if you just want to look at the black and whiteness of the question of gas, it's not financially sound. Gas, like all fossil fuels, is in rapid decline around the world. Demand is in terminal decline, including from our key trading partners. So all countries in the world really are trying to get off of fossil fuels and move quickly to more affordable and cleaner alternatives like renewable energy. So to think that we as a country alone can continue to expand gas and keep a market afloat is simply not economically realistic. Renewable energy now makes more sense cost-wise than any known fossil fuel, and it's becoming literally day to day cheaper to use battery storage and renewables to provide our energy needs, whether it's for industrial uses or for domestic use. Renewable energy technology has changed and improved so rapidly that gas really can no longer be considered any kind of competitor. And it's certainly not a transition fuel, which is what our government continues to tell us. In fact, calling it a transition fuel at this stage is absolutely, quite frankly, just industry propaganda. It's a powerfully polluting form of energy. We simply can't use it anymore. And investing in it, quite frankly, is a dangerous proposition. Without a doubt, more increase of investment into gas means stranded assets, which means things that we can never use and things we'll never get money back from. So if you're an investor or you're a company looking to expand gas, you're taking a huge risk. And it's also very, very risky for us economically as a country. Fourthly, the cost of gas. We have the most expensive gas costs in the world, even though we're producing it here. And that's a structural challenge that's been built up in our economy to make it more effective for companies to sell our gas overseas for higher prices. So in an odd way, this structure has meant that we've found renewables to be cheaper because they sit outside of this gas regulatory framework that is not regulated on the cost front for domestic use, which means we're paying top dollar and it's not going to come down if you add more gas into the mix of our energy sources. So Prime Minister Scott Morrison stacked his COVID economic recovery committee with gas executives, and he got exactly the recommendations he wanted, which were more gas. Every known expert economically that is independent of gas and fossil fuels has said it makes no sense. So to pursue gas expansion, and particularly with taxpayer money, is a complete conflict and even more BS to this idea that we're going to be, technologically not making a choice. We're not going to pick a technology. We're going to let the market decide. We've just done completely the opposite of that by stacking the committee with gas experts who are going to tell us that what we need is more gas. We've seen with just under 1.5 degrees of warming already around the world, 12 million acres of Australia's land and bush go up in flames. Many people lost their lives. They've lost their livelihoods. They've lost homes, equipment, infrastructure. Meanwhile, California, Oregon, and Washington are experiencing the same kind of deadly impacts. We've seen cyclones and extreme weather take off around the world. 21 cyclones have happened in the Northern Hemisphere just this one season. It's by far the worst we've ever seen. We're seeing increased flooding, drought, and sea level rise. This is just under 1 degree. So imagine what we would be experiencing if we pursued gas and we blew out our carbon budget. And we went beyond 2 degrees, 3 degrees, or even 4 degrees. We simply can't afford more fossil fuels. And Australia desperately needs leadership so that we can find a way to transition from coal, oil, and gas, and how to help our communities find our place in a new low-carbon innovation world where that's what people are paying for and that's what they're investing in. Worldwide green recovery dollars are where we're headed. Europe and many parts of the world are looking to use COVID recovery money to invest exactly in this transition that has to happen. It could be green hydrogen. It could be green aviation fuel made from green hydrogen. It could be green steel. It's renewable energy systems and management. It could be, any kind of thing in our region that helps us all transition off of fossil fuels and into the what next. Sadly, the major obstacle in our country right now